Hi, welcome to another edition of This Issue. My guest this time is John Olson from Jefferson, Maine. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bruce.
We're glad to have you. We're going to talk about the illegal U.S. overthrow of the Hawaiian Kingdom in 1893. And you've just written a book about this situation called Liberate Hawaii, Renouncing and Defying the Continuing Fraudulent U.S. Claim to the Sovereignty of Hawaii. Why did you write the book, John?
Fundamentally because of justice. I have understood the Hawaiian history. There's been a great deal of legal and historical research done by Hawaiians in the past several years that proves that not only was it an illegal overthrow and not conquest, but it was a takeover by coup d'etat, and it was not only illegal but fraudulent, which is why I wrote the book, to expose this to American people who don't know that history.
And who did the U.S. overthrow?
Well, the Queen was Liliuokalani, who had taken office in 1891 upon the death of her brother, who had named her his successor. And she was in office only for 2 years before a small group of businessmen, Caucasian businessmen, whose roots incidentally came from the Kennebec Valley here in Maine as descendants of missionaries. Most of them were of that lineage.
All right, we'll come back around to that bit, but I want to talk a bit more about you. But first, where can people pick up this book?
Well, we have a few places in stores. Also through myself, if people want to write to me, it's P.O. Box 362, Jefferson, Maine, 04348. But as far as bookstores, we have a couple here in Bath.
Or in Brunswick.
No, also Bath. There's the Bath bookstore.
Oh, okay.
And at Gulf of Maine bookstores. I have a few in Portland at Longfellow Books. And Amazon, of course, people can get it through Amazon.
Okay. All right. So you grew up in Maine.
Yes.
Up in Jefferson, but you lived in Hawaii for how many years?
I was there 36 years, and I lived in Maine for 36 years, so now people know how old I am.
So tell us about your story in Hawaii.
Well, I went there in 1965 as a graduate student in philosophy. And which I got a master's there in '67. But this was being the middle of the '60s. I was deeply involved with the anti-war, anti-draft movement, which basically took over my life for the next 10 years. I was a founding member of SDS, the draft resistance, the resistance we called it, Peace and Freedom Party, much later the Hawaii Green Party. I also owned and ran a radical bookstore for 7 years.
And what was the experience like for you there in Hawaii? Did it
Life-changing.
have some impact on you?
Life-changing. First of all, being exposed to a non-white majority population, having come from Maine, that itself was quite unique, and adapting to the Hawaiian lifestyle and just different nuances of existence. It was quite profound. Which I liked. I felt drawn there. It was like a magnet that drew me to Hawaii.
And tell me about the people. What way, and the culture, what way were you affected by that?
Well, an acceptance. It took a little time for me to adjust. It was a lot of internal, undefined, nuanced changes, but just gradually an acceptance. I find that in spite of a rather substantial and well-deserved anti-white mentality that people often have there due to the history, that if you treat people respectfully, you will be treated respectfully. So a lot depends on your own conduct.
All right. So why then did you come back to Maine after so many years, 36 years?
36 years, yes.
In Hawaii.
Well, my dad was turning 90, and I had lost my mother in 1975 to a car accident. And I didn't want to lose my dad without being able to spend some significant time with him. That was the reason, number one. Secondly, I was missing the farm that we grew up on, which is where I live now, and Damariscotta Lake. And my son, I brought with me to go to Lincoln Academy, which is where I had gone. and my daughter was in college at Oberlin in Ohio. So the idea was we'd move our family here.
All right. You've started a business since you've come back to Maine that kind of links both Hawaii and Maine, and you have a poster. Can you
Yes.
show that
Yes.
and
Well,
tell us
okay.
about the product that you make?
Okay. Well, I do tropical Maine. See, I'm tropical Maine too, having lived in both places. But this is my logo. The surfing moose represents tropical Maine, and it consists of Maine maple syrup and passion fruit concentrate. And normally people would add sugar to the passion fruit, which is delicious but quite sour. And so when I was in Hawaii, I thought, having come from Maine, maple syrup would give it a better flavor yet. And I found that worked very well. So when I came back here, where there's an abundance of maple syrup, I got my act together, and now I produce it. This is my 7th year of production.
And you're selling it all over the state.
I wouldn't say all over. I go to a number of craft shows. I get most of my business from craft shows because nobody knows what it is until they taste it.
Yeah.
So I give little samples, all day long. I might do several hundred little samples to people at the craft shows, and a few stores carry it, but it's mostly that way.
Well, let's talk about your book now and the real story, the annexation of Hawaii that happened in 1893. Tell us about this.
Well, first of all, the annexation, so-called, and I would put that in quotes, did not happen in 1893. That was the coup d'etat against the Queen, Liliuokalani, in which she protested vigorously to President Cleveland. Official channels, a very highly articulate, intelligent woman with great moral character. And so she said, I will stand aside, faced with the armed might of the U.S. I don't want to go to war with the United States, so I will stand aside and appeal to Washington, which was successful. President Cleveland came in to power just about that time, and he was confronted with the coup makers who wanted to annex Hawaii, and her protest, and that with other Hawaiians as well. So he sent a representative to investigate, who did an honest report, and Cleveland absolutely denounced the coup against the Queen.
What did the report say?
The report
Basically
supported her, that this was an act of war against her government that was unjustified and unauthorized by Minister Stevens, representing the U.S., minister being roughly an ambassador, who incidentally used to be the editor of the Kennebec Journal in his younger days.
So all these main connections.
There are
here.
main connections.
Yeah. So keep going.
Yes. So the annexation, so-called, happened in 1898 after the so-called Treaty of Annexation failed in Congress due to the protests of Hawaiians.
So Congress at one time initially said no.
Exactly right. They did. There was an attempt to annex that was being submitted when Cleveland took over. He took it off the table. It was resubmitted under the McKinley administration, but it failed to get the 2/3 majority. And so what they did was put a joint resolution of Congress. Now that's very important to know. Congress does not have the authority to annex a foreign country, which clearly Hawaii was, any more than today they could annex Denmark or Peru or any other country. And that's that's why I call it a fraudulent annexation upon which even statehood rests. So every step of the way was fraudulent, and I would claim Hawaii is not and never has been part of the United States. It's all a historical illusion.
So at this time then of the coup and then the annexation of Hawaii, how about the Hawaiian people themselves? Did they also protest?
Absolutely. There was almost unanimous agreement that they in no way wanted annexation. There was a giant petition called the Kue petition that was only rediscovered in modern times in 1995 by a woman doing research, Noi Silva. And she discovered this in the Library of Congress.
That's
and
because this petition had gone to Washington
exactly
and
right.
was forgotten.
It wasn't forgotten at the time. It was submitted, and one of the
Right.
reasons why it didn't pass the Treaty of Annexation. But it had been forgotten by history,
Yeah.
and there were thousands, I would say something in the range like 90% of the Hawaiian population, that is to say the native Hawaiian, plus others who were subjects of the kingdom. It wasn't strictly ethnic,
Yeah.
but protested immensely at the time.
Yeah, and so then this petition was discovered. It was brought back to Hawaii and displayed.
Exactly. At Bishop Museum, which is the center for Hawaiian and other Polynesian cultures in Honolulu, and I saw, witnessed, and I mean, it raised the hair on my arm just to see it, even though I'm not Hawaiian. It was just so moving to see all over the walls these thousands and thousands of names, probably 30,000 or so names of the people. And so imagine the effect on contemporary Hawaiians when they saw this.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Did it reignite the what is the effort called formally in Hawaii today?
Well, it's regaining sovereignty. It's called the Hawaii Sovereignty Movement, which is a broad overview. And nobody uses the word secession because secession is inappropriate because they're saying regain our full sovereignty, recognizing that the so-called state of Hawaii is a fully controlled U.S. entity. I mean, nobody denies that U.S. controls Hawaii, but the sovereignty truly never passed from the Hawaiian people.
You also talk about in the book why the U.S. Essentially wanted Hawaii. It was sort of a strategic outpost. Talk more about that.
Sure. Well, it wasn't just from the U.S. side. It was from the instigators who were basically had allegiance to the U.S., but who were living in Hawaii and were Hawaii citizens who initiated it, but then with the support of this Minister Stevens and others in Congress who were promoting annexation. You got to remember that it was the middle of the Pacific, so it's a perfect place to have a staging area for commerce and warfare. They wanted Pearl Harbor, and they wanted also to exclude Japan. This was part of the thinking, that Japan was a rising country, and they were afraid that if they didn't take it, that the Japanese would. So in some sense, it was a preemptive strike. And we see that kind of thing being reflected in today's world as well.
Yeah. And today, the U.S. Pacific Command is headquartered in Hawaii, correct?
Yes.
What is the job of the Pacific Command?
Well, they control the biggest military territory in the world, covering basically from the U.S. West Coast all the way to Eastern Asia and everything in between. They have enormous scope, and there's dozens of bases. On the island itself, the island of Oahu, where it's located, is about 605 square miles. So think roughly 30 by 20 miles would constitute that. Huge chunks of it, roughly 23% of that entire island is controlled by the military. What is remaining, a lot of it is very steep mountains where nobody can live or grow food, because the mountains some of them are like this. But it's good for vegetation, which allows for the rainfall to filter down into the natural reservoirs underground.
So essentially, though, Hawaii, not only Oahu, but other islands as well, are really, Hawaii is a military colony, isn't that correct?
Yeah, in large degree, absolutely right.
Yeah. So is this subject of Hawaiian sovereignty then just a matter of academic discussion, or is there some real energy around this movement?
People have a clue here in not only Maine, but the rest of the U.S., except for a handful of people that follow this. This is an enormous issue currently, and has been. It's been evolving for a number of years as the depth of the research comes forward. There's many sovereignty movements. A couple of people have declared themselves king, which is, self-declared doesn't really make it. I think that what probably ought to happen is an election, which is how Kalakaua got into power in 1875, when there was no heir due to the sudden death of his predecessor.
What would you say to those who might be listening that say, "Oh, come on, man, just this is ridiculous. The U.S. owns it. We're not giving up Hawaii. Why not, forget about it?"
Okay, great question. First of all, I would suggest that they read my book. Secondly, the example of Lithuania, which was taken over by the Soviet Union in 1940 after having been promised by Lenin that the then new Soviet Union would forever relinquish control over Lithuania. And they were suppressed, very similar to Hawaii, the fraudulent takeover. And that was finally won after 50 years. 50 years they had been supposedly annexed by the Soviet Union, but as of 1990 they became again a free nation with the collapse of the Soviet infrastructure, and partly because of the Lithuanian resistance. That was one of the triggers. So that is the analogy, I think, is quite apt, that empires do not survive indefinitely. And at the time that the U.S. empire disintegrates, and who knows when that will be, Hawaii then can be, again, its own free country.
In June of 2014, just a month or so ago, the U.S. Department of Interior began a series of public hearings all over the Hawaiian Islands about this very situation. And I read that in the very first hearing, 143 people testified. What did the Hawaiian people, especially the native Hawaiian people, what do they want? What do they want to happen next?
They want their country. That, and the bottom line is...
And so they haven't given up. They're still on the case.
Absolutely. Increasing.
And they're now, these hearings are happening as a result of this pressure and this dynamic?
Yes, I would say so. There was a letter that was sent by the Office of Hawaiian Affairs Executive Director to Secretary John Kerry, who, and this was not the Interior Department, but to the State Department, because that governs relations between countries. And in essence, if I were to boil it down, the letter asked, under what international law can you cite that the United States has jurisdiction over Hawaii? And they can't. They're in checkmate. But they won't acknowledge that, of course, so there was no reply to the letter. And so instead they sent, scrambling to cover their ground and co-opt this movement, they sent people from the Interior Department to try to negotiate something comparable to what exists for the Native American population. Hawaiians aren't buying it at all. They're saying, we want our country back.
Very interesting. Before the show, you were telling me about the growing outrage throughout the Hawaiian Islands about GMO testing.
Yes.
As one example of colonization. Talk more about that.
Right. Well, Hawaii, because it can grow crops year-round, there's no freeze in the winter, it's become the center worldwide for GMO testing, which also involves an enormous use of highly toxic pesticides that are literally making people sick. There are times when people have had to close schools and cart children and teachers off to hospitals for emergency care due to the pesticides. And so this is a huge matter that affects most of them, but particularly on Kauai, where the people have revolted and have passed an ordinance that mandates that the chemical companies, and there are multiple, it's not only Monsanto, there's multiple companies, that they have to, first of all, disclose what it is that they're using, which they don't want to do, and that they have a significant buffer zone between the fields and the schools and residences. And on the Big Island, they've also passed an ordinance prohibiting any GMO use and testing, with the exception of papayas as grandfathered in, because they did that in order to avoid a significant blight that was happening to papayas. But other than that, currently it's not legal. And of course, the chemical companies are fighting that.
So this GMO testing, is this just one more trigger that is driving this movement?
Oh yes, oh yes. It's one of many, and of course the military occupation. So the correct designation for Hawaii is not state of the United States, but rather occupied country for 116 years. That would be the correct designation legally by international law. Of course, the U.S. doesn't recognize international law unless it's their desire to abide by it.
Yeah. In 1993, President Clinton apologized to Native Hawaiians. What did he actually say, and why did he do this?
Okay, I think the reason came because at the 100th anniversary, which is 1993, January 17th, and I was present at that time.
In Hawaii.
In Hawaii. I was present at this enormous event. 12,000 people came out to Iolani Palace, which was the seat of government before, to commemorate with solemn dignity and pride and determination to protest the U.S. occupation of Hawaii. And I think that scared the powers that be. Said, where's it going to go from here? Let's do something to co-opt this. So as a result of that, Congress passed and Clinton signed a resolution apologizing to the Hawaiian people and basically saying let's have reconciliation. You know, yes, we did it. It was they clear as can be. And
so they admitted that they had stolen the country.
Exactly right, and that's in the book. That's Appendix B. The first appendix is President Cleveland's major address to Congress in 1893. This one is 100 years later in 1993, apologizing and acknowledging that it was illegal, but basically saying, okay, yeah, we made a big mistake. Sorry about that. Let's be friends.
Yeah, and let's forget about it.
Yeah. So it was a start. It was a start, but I think it was triggered by that enormous protest at Iolani Palace.
Well, I was stationed in Hawaii for 15 months in the Air Force during the Vietnam War, and I learned about the aloha spirit. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about what that really means? And you also have a song that you're going to sing for us, reflecting this aloha spirit.
Yeah, this is outside the box for me, to do any singing. People who know me know that I don't normally sing in public, but I thought this would be appropriate. The aloha spirit has to do with a very sort of a spiritual recognition of mutuality and respect and love. Aloha can mean many things. Typical welcome, hello, goodbye, love you. Just a mutual respect is probably the most concise way I could do it. And let me do that. This song is one which is called Hawaii Aloha, which is basically loving Hawaii, comparable, I would say, to what our society would have for America the Beautiful. So it goes. E Hawaii e ku'one hana e ku'home kula ibine oli no ana pono lani o e Hawaii aloha e haoli na o pio O Hawaii ne, oli e, maina ahe makane a pau mai ne, mau ke aloha no Hawaii.
All right, beautiful, beautiful. Good job.
A first.
and I think we have the time for the English translation. So
okay.
Give us that.
Okay, real quick. O Hawaii, O sands of my birth, my native home, I rejoice in the blessings of heaven. O Hawaii, aloha. Happy youth of Hawaii, rejoice, rejoice. Gentle breezes blow. Love always for Hawaii. And this song is done usually in group settings with people holding hands, like at the conclusion of a ceremony. So it's sort of a unifying across nationalities, ethnicities. Even the entire legislature of Hawaii has been known to sing Hawaii Aloha holding hands. Imagine that in Augusta or in Washington, D.C.
Hard to imagine. So, John, you lived in Hawaii for 36 years. You lived in Maine for 36 years. You're originally from Maine. And now you're selling this product you're combining passion fruit and maple syrup. What do you call the product?
I call it tropical Maine.
Tropical Maine. So you've really integrated these two cultures, very different from one another.
Yeah.
And your heart still lies there somewhere in the Pacific Ocean.
I think I feel equally at home in Maine and Hawaii. I mean, the specific place that I grew up on, our family farm where I live, and Hawaii, not a specific building, but just living there, I feel equally. I mean, I'm half and half.
Yeah. So what do you think happens next? You've written this book, Liberate Hawaii. You're trying to help build support and educate people about this still teeming discussion and debate and movement that's going on inside the Hawaiian Islands. People here don't know anything about it. We never read about it in our newspaper. I wonder why.
Guess who owns the newspapers and the mass media?
Yeah. But what do you think happens next?
Continuing building of support. I think that what needs to happen is expanding out from the native Hawaiian population to the other ethnicities for whom Hawaii is truly home. I think that's one issue that needs to be more deeply addressed. And what I've taken on is my kuleana, which is a great Hawaiian word meaning area of responsibility.
Kumiana?
No, kuleana.
Kuleana.
Yeah. It's a great single word that means jurisdiction, area of responsibility that you accept for yourself. So my kuleana is basically to try to educate the American population about this significant issue and to recognize that the justice requires this. And I've got to come up with a little phrase that might be relevant. If we act with honor, we can have truth. If we have truth, we can achieve justice. And if we have justice, we will finally earn peace. I think that's the sequence.
Very beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, good luck with your kuleana.
Thank you very much, Bruce.
And good luck with your book sales. Liberate Hawaii. You can pick it up at Gulf of Maine Books in Brunswick or the Longfellow Bookstore in Portland.
And a couple in Bath.
There's bookstores in Bath, or you can get it
the one,
on Amazon.
Yeah, through Amazon, yeah.
John, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you. It's been a
Good
pleasure.
luck to you. And thank you for watching another edition of This Issue. Until next time, good luck to you all, and please get organized.